Hello and welcome to Good Morning Europe. It's Monday, the 11th of July. I'm Andrea Bolaitho, and these are your top stories this hour.
Emergency workers in the Donetsk town of Chasiv Yar continue to search for survivors after Saturday's deadly Russian missile attack on 3 residential buildings. More than 10 candidates have put their hat into the ring to replace UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson as tax issues become a central battleground in the contest. And Sri Lanka's opposition parties agree to form a unity government, following Gotabaya Rajapaksa's promise to stand down after civilians stormed the presidential palace.
Emergency workers in eastern Ukraine continue to search for survivors in the ruins of 3 buildings that were hit in a Russian rocket attack on the town of Chasiv Yar in Donetsk. At least 1 man was pulled from the rubble after a lengthy operation to free him from under concrete. At least 15 people were killed and about 30 others are still missing following Saturday's late-night attack. Dozens of ordinary Ukrainians are helping the emergency workers to try and pull people out. The strike on a residential area of the town is inhabited mostly by people who work in nearby factories. This woman says her son, who's 32 years old, went to see where the missile strike was. When the second hit, he jumped out into the corridor, and he and his father were knocked out along with the doors. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky responded to the missile strike in his nightly address, saying that everyone who gives orders for such strikes on civilians will be punished. They're killing civilians deliberately, he said. Russia, which claims it's conducting a special military operation to demilitarize Ukraine, denies deliberately attacking civilians. Kyiv has urged locals in the Russian-occupied southern region of Kherson to evacuate because its armed forces are reportedly preparing a counterattack.
A major leak of confidential files has revealed how Uber, the international ride-hailing service, lobbied political leaders to ease labour and taxi laws as it aggressively pushed into markets around the world. According to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the so-called Uber files span a 5-year period when the company was run by co-founder Travis Kalanick. They revealed for the first time how an €88 million a year lobbying and public relations budget funded attempts to get friendly top politicians across Europe to relax employment rules for the San Francisco startup. French President Emmanuel Macron, who was serving as finance minister at the time, was among those they targeted in a bid to make Paris Uber's first international outpost. While several governments saw the company as a source of growth and badly needed new jobs, taxi drivers such as those in Paris and other cities staged sometimes violent protests against Uber drivers. For many, Uber's business model was synonymous with wholesale job insecurity and the casualisation of labour. Uber says its past aggressive behaviour is not in line with present values, and it is a different company today. Sri Lanka's opposition parties have agreed on a new united government following the storming and occupation of the President's and Prime Minister's residences by protesters enraged over the economic crisis. Leaders from the political parties met to discuss an effective transition of power late on Sunday, following a promise by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to step down on July 13th. Thousands of protesters say they will remain at the President's house, some enjoying the luxurious facilities, until the resignations of both leaders have been made official.
Hi, ma'am. For past 6 months, people were struggling in the queues. People are in the fuel queues, people are in the gas queues. But now people have hope.
The President has been blamed for Sri Lanka's economic mismanagement, which has caused shortages of food, fuel and medicine for months. It's been reported that President Rajapaksa is no longer in the country, but the parliamentary speaker says he will return on Wednesday.
Amid row after row of graves, it's easy to forget that this happened only a generation ago. Bosnians are commemorating the 27th anniversary of the Srebrenica massacre, part of Europe's only acknowledged genocide since World War II. This year, an international conference, The Heroines of Srebrenica, was held at the massacre's Memorial Centre. The gathering focuses on how those women left behind found strength to fight for justice after being driven from their homes and witnessing their loved ones being taken away to be killed.
The Srebrenica women have borne the biggest burden of this world, fighting for justice during the war and after the war. I am proud that we have also managed to bring up our children without feelings of hate or without feelings of revenge, and I think the women of the world should learn from us about this.
Manira's relatives were among more than 8,000 men and boys from the mainly Muslim Bosniak ethnic group who were killed in 10 days of slaughter after the town was overrun by Bosnian Serb forces in the civil war there. Here their names lie, never to be forgotten.
Police are investigating if a shooting in Pietermaritzburg in South Africa, which killed 4 and left 8 others wounded, is linked to the attack in a Soweto bar, which killed 15. They happened on the same night. In both cases, the gunmen are said to have fired at people randomly. Also 2 weeks ago, 22 people, mainly teenagers, died in a township tavern. It's thought they were poisoned. Aid to 4 million people in Syria is under threat after diplomats struggled to find a deal with Russia at the UN. A delivery mechanism across Turkey's border into rebel-held Syria is at the Bab al-Hawa crossing, and it's the only way UN assistance can reach civilians without cross areas controlled by Syrian government forces. The mechanism expired Sunday, but talks continue. There are at least 10 candidates vying to replace Boris Johnson as leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister. The race widened significantly over the weekend, with the issue of tax changes emerging as a central issue. With such a crowded race, the 1922 committee of backbench Tory MPs will today set out the regulations and the timetable for the leadership election.
Well, it was a busy weekend in British politics as the race to replace Boris Johnson as Conservative Party leader and thus Prime Minister of this country took off, with no less than 11 candidates announcing they were running. Now, there is not yet a fixed timetable of this race. That's going to be revealed later on today. The only thing we know is that the first TV debate will be held a week from now on Sky News. But some of the candidates are well known. Many of them we thought were running, the likes of Nadhim Zahawi, Jeremy Hunt, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak. Some of them less well known, like Penny Mordaunt. And then you've got some backbenchers as well, people like Tom Tugendhat running. So it is a pretty open field. And yeah, it could be yet more people declaring their candidacy. The difference between this race and the previous two to replace David Cameron and then Theresa May is that it was all about then getting someone who could do a job, deliver Brexit. That has been the fault line in the Conservative Party for some 30 years. The party now says that Brexit is done, and what they're doing now is a much more difficult choice. It is about the direction they want to take this country. So far, many of the candidates say that in the face of the cost of living crisis, they want to bring down people's taxes, that is fundamental. Rishi Sunak, though, who has been Chancellor for the past couple of years, says that they can't believe the British public fairy tales on taxes, that there are tough decisions to be made, and we can't leave our children with a difficult legacy when it comes to those finances. But we will see what voters want. With inflation running at around 10%, that message is going to cut through, but I think they'll be wanting to see some pretty strong costings of how they're going to pay for it all. Vincent McAviney, Euronews, London.
We're going to take a short break now. Still to come on Good Morning Europe, more top stories and analysis from Europe. Stay with us.